This is Quintus Curtius, and good evening. And this podcast is going to be a little bit about leadership, or actually a lot about leadership, or at least a specific lesson in leadership that I think needs to be talked about a little bit. The title is Do the Job That You Were Assigned to Do. Do the job that you were assigned to do. And I'll describe what I mean by that, and we'll talk about the specific example that gave rise to the idea to talk about this. But when you're assigned a job, when you're given a task to do, when you're given an assignment or a task, or when you're placed in a position of leadership and responsibility, you have to do that job. You don't have a choice. Whether you want to do it or not, you have to do it. You have to carry it out. And sometimes when you're in a position of leadership, you will be asked to do things that you find unpleasant, unpalatable, unwanted, distasteful, unpleasant, whatever you want to call it. But you'll have to do them anyway, because that's part of the program. That's part of the job. And one of those parts of the job is sometimes you have to be the heavy. Sometimes you have to bring down the hammer on people. Sometimes you have to figuratively execute people. You have to do things to set the tone, to impose discipline, to impose order, to get the job done, to carry out your commission. You have to do certain things. And I mention this because it seems to me that we live in a society right now where people want to be shielded from the unpleasantries of life. People want to avoid having to be the heavy. People want to dodge responsibility. They don't like it. They don't find it to comport with their idea of themselves, the idea that they're just everybody's friend and that they're just going to be loved by everybody and they're going to be popular and adored and adulation will come their way. Okay, life is not like that. If you want to be a good leader, now if you want to be a chicken shit, if you want to be a wimp, a cowardly leader, a chicken shit, yeah, you can be a do-nothing, a jello back, a wuss, a coward who does nothing and just goes with the flow, which is basically about 95% of the leaders that we have now at the local, state, and federal level. They're all like that because they were never trained in an organizational way. They were never trained under duress. They never understood what it meant to have to answer the mail under pressure, under duress, under extreme duress. And this is why military service, in my view, is so important. Okay? Yeah, not every single great leader in history has been an ex-military man, but sure as hell a lot of them have been. And I think it's because they have experience in knowing how to respond to extreme pressure, extreme adversity. They've been through it before. There's a certain hardening, there's a certain conditioning that comes along with that. And you can't replicate that anywhere else. You can't come by those lessons other than through life, in my view. Again, it's not an absolute requirement, but it sure as hell is a strong indicator. And what specifically prompted the idea for this podcast was just the real. I've tweeted about this before, but the case study I think we need to look at is this mayor of Portland, this Ted Wheeler. Ted Wheeler, the mayor of Portland. Now, this guy is this example is an incredibly clear and obvious example of a failure of leadership. This is an individual who was the mayor of Portland, and during the year 2020, his city was racked by riots, demonstrations, urban unrest, chaos, primarily fomented by anarchist groups, mobs of various persuasions, people just out there for the fun of it, people with a political agenda or an imagined political agenda, whatever the reason. Basically, anarchist mobs took over the streets or parts of the city and really trashed a lot, really did a lot of damage in Portland and in Seattle and in many other cities. Okay, I could pick various other mayors or governors, but I'm going to select this individual because he seems to be a very, very clear example of it. And now it wasn't the whole city, okay, contrary to what the media, but it was bad. It was pretty bad. You had the federal courthouse being surrounded by armed mobs trying to basically burn it down for weeks on end. And the mayor of Portland, instead of imposing order, instead of doing what was necessary to impose order, to clear the streets, to restore a sense of law and order in the streets, he chose to basically try to do nothing. He just basically chose to, first he would give press conferences, he would blame other people, he would try to deflect attention from who was actually doing it by blaming, various imaginary right-wing groups that were allegedly doing, which was an odd patent lie. Okay, everyone knew who was doing it. Everyone knew what was going on. But because he either sympathized with these people or he felt like his voting constituency would be undermined if he attacked them directly, he chose to say nothing. So in other words, he sacrificed his duty, he sacrificed his people at the altar of his own personal convenience. He did what was best for himself, in my view. Again, this is my own personal opinion, and people can draw whatever conclusions they want, but I'm giving you my opinion of events. Okay? I'm giving you my opinion. In my view, my read of that situation was this was someone who very easily could have done what was necessary to restore order, but chose not to. He blamed other people. He tried to redirect the problem. He tried to blame everybody else but himself. He tried to blame everyone else but himself. And so what happened was, as always happens when you're dealing with violent people and violence in general, it metastasized. It didn't go away. It got worse. It got worse and worse and worse. And so now you have a situation where, and I just posted a clip of this, apparently someone took a video, where he basically can't even go in public, or he's getting accosted in public by people. He's viewed with contempt by everyone, it seems. So you have a situation here where a failure of will, where someone failed to uphold his oath, to protect. Well, if you're going to be a mayor or a governor or a president, one of your jobs is you have to make people feel secure. You have to provide security for property and security for business, and you have to protect your communities. You can't just sit there and do nothing while mobs rage around and do what they want. Power in many ways comes down to perception. And once you lose the perception of power, once people sense that you are not in control, you're done. You're done. And I think that's what happened. People basically just saw that there were no consequences, that there was a sense that mobs could just be somehow placated and bargained with, and you could have discussions. And again, it's not just Seattle. I saw the same dynamic in Minneapolis. I saw the same dynamic in Seattle. I saw the same dynamic in other cities. Okay, I'm just happened to just use this one example because there was a example of a clip of him getting accosted at a restaurant. Okay, but the lessons apply equally. The commonality of all these situations are failures to take a hard line at the early stages when trouble starts, failure to rein in chaos, failure to impose order, failure to look like the heavy. Nobody wants to look like the hard ass. Nobody wants to be put in a situation where they might get blamed for something. See, this is what all these politicians are all about. It's all about them. It's all about what they want. It's all about how they look. They don't care about their jobs, in my view. Again, my opinion. I'm giving you my opinion. You may have a different opinion, and that's fine. I'm giving you my opinion. But my read of a lot of these, quote, leaders that we have today, quote unquote, leaders, is that they care about themselves and only about themselves. They don't care about the job they were assigned to do. They don't care about fulfilling their mission. They care about themselves. And this is a chronic disease we have in this country. This chicken shit mentality we have. It's just so contemptible, so despicable to me. It's hard for me to control my disgust. But the paradox of all this is that this type of appeasement never works. It never works, because when you're in a position of leadership, your people know if you're towing the line or not. They can see if you're answering the mail or not. They know. They're not stupid. They see what's going on. And if you're not answering the mail, if you're not, if you're shirking your obligations, if you're shirking your responsibilities, they're going to lose all respect for you, and then you're done. You are done. You're done. And one of the things that I've learned is that people are generally pretty forgiving about good faith mistakes. If you get into a job, up to a point, of course, and if you're trying and there's a learning curve and you're making good faith mistakes, people will generally give you the benefit of the doubt up to a point. Okay. But if you're abandoning your people, if you're abandoning them, and that's what shirking your responsibility comes down to, it's abandonment. If you are trying to save your own ass and cover your own ass and not doing what you need to do, that's a betrayal. That's an egregious shirking of obligations. And I find that just despicable and contemptible. So that's the lesson, I think, that we need to learn from these governors. The governors of 2020. That's what I should call them, the governors of 2020. All these derelict, the mayors and governors of 2020. All of these derelict mayors and governors that just sat there and did nothing. They just sat there like chicken shits and they did nothing, in my view. Now, I'm sure maybe they would say, yeah, I did all this stuff. And my answer would be bullshit. Bullshit. You didn't do much. You didn't do anything significant. You wrote it out. You waited out, because everyone is afraid of the optics of how something is going to look if they see tear gas or, National Guardsmen or police, imposing order. And sometimes things don't look pretty. Sometimes things, regardless. I mean, how leaders decide to solve a problem is up to them. The specific tactics will have to depend on the situation. But I didn't see much, if anything, of response from a lot of these mayors and governors. I didn't see much of anything. And the lesson there is, you better do the job you were assigned to do. And you may very well be hated. You may very well be successful. You may very well be unsuccessful. But no matter what, the very worst thing you can do is nothing. The very worst thing you can do is to try to dance around the issue and shirk your obligation. That's the most contemptible thing to do. The worst thing you can do. You should never do that. So keep that in mind. If you're ever in a job, and all of you will be in leadership positions and you will be tested. Anyone who's ever been in a leadership position will be tested. And when you are tested, you had better respond. You had better respond in the right way. You better fucking try. You better fucking try. That's your obligation. That's your duty. All right. That's enough for tonight. I'm Quintus Curtius. Good night.